Right. It's titled The Father's Prayer. There's an evangelist that pointed out once that in his youth ministry he could literally take all the good, helpful, and attentive youth and take the promiscuous and rebellious youth and note the one thing that the rebellious ones had in common was simply that they never had a loyal dad, while the good youth groups did. He mentioned that they didn't even have to be a good dad. Dad just had to be around. And it changed their outcome in their life significantly. There was an NFL chaplain who said the same thing during an interview and added that many of those players who can buy everything their heart's desires, when they made that special play, they would look up into the stands and hoping and wishing and praying to see, just once, their dad cheering for them. They would give it up just for seeing that happening. I'd like to talk today about a father's prayer, not just any father, but a godly father. If you are not a godly father, it's my hope that you would like to be one. If you are one, this message will give you some encouragement, hopefully some direction. It's important to begin with the obvious, that being a father is more than just making children. Let's face it, it's hard enough to find a father who has been with their family from the beginning to the end, much less find a godly father who prays regularly for his children. The nature of society and the culture begins at home. Families make societies. When we see a society, we are seeing a collective reflection of the family. Yahweh calls us to be set-apart fathers. He wants us to be praying fathers. Someone said that the church needs men of prayer, but what the family needs is a praying father. The need for praying today is seen in every time you open the paper, every time you turn on the news. You see the poor conditions of morality all around us. Society is turning sin into virtue, and virtue into sin. But society begins with the family. To heal the nation, we are given the prescription in 2 Chronicles chapter 7 and verse 14. If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land. Notice it says, my people who are called by my name. Not the atheists, not the secularists, not the agnostics, or the Buddhists, or the Muslims, or the Hindus. My people will humble themselves and pray. We can't seem to make it to the second step. People just don't want to pray anymore. Instead of revivalism, moral relativism is sweeping the land. Rights and wrong are determined based on our feelings instead of the Bible. Has the spirit of Elohim left America like he left Samson? I hope not, but if we wake up from our slumber and realize that our strength is gone, we are in big trouble. Not because our enemies can overpower us, but because the Spirit has left us. We are not a great country. We just serve a great Elohim. The sooner we realize this, the greater our country will be. Our problems cannot be solved in the White House, but in Yahweh's house, in your house, in my house. By praying and seeking and turning back to Yahweh. We must stop looking to politicians from either party and start looking to Yeshua Messiah. We are always demanding prayer in schools. First, we need it in our homes before we demand it in the schools. We are angry about separation of church and state. What are you angry about? Your lifestyle agrees with it. Who is coming to church anymore? We are so reluctant to pray, and we wonder why our church or a country or a family or the state is in the way it is. I'm telling you, we would see those lost children saved. We would see those hurting children healed. We would see those blessings come flowing down from heaven directly to our country, our community, our families, if only we would pray and pray and pray and pray some more. Make it a lifestyle. Who is willing to put that much prayer work into it? Where are the prayer warriors today? I believe that part of the moral rot that is in America today can be directly traced back to the dying off of the generation of those old, faithful, tenacious, broken down prayer warriors. Ravenhill Sharisha has a story of a woman who once told a well-known evangelist that Daddy, her husband, goes through that door at 6 in the morning and he doesn't come out until 6 in the evening. And they were asked why, and she said, he prays. The evidence of his prayer life was found after he died when a loved one went into his room and there were 2 divots in the old wood floor by the bed where his knees had landed day after day pleading to Elohim on behalf of his wife and children. The funeral director noted that the old man had camel knees from being on them all the time. He lived more of his life on his knees than he did on his feet. The measure of a godly father is found in his prayer life. We see a godly father in King David, and some scholars say that Solomon was a teenager when David prayed this prayer over his son. So let's look at what a godly father prays for. He prays for the blessing. In 1 Chronicles chapter 22, verse 11, now my son, Yahweh be with thee, and prosper you, and build the house of Yahweh thy Elohim, as he has said of thee. David first prays, Yahweh be with you. The greatest blessing to have is the author of all blessings, Yahweh. Usually the most important thing to us comes to our mind first when we pray. It's a father's prayer for his children to be with Yahweh and Yahweh to be with his children. How much do godly men and women owe to their praying parents? There is an absence of Yahweh in the youth of America today, partly because there is an absence of prayer on their behalf. Rarely do you find a godly young man who hasn't been corrupted by the filth of this world, who hasn't been perverted by a sex excess culture or debased by an entertainment industry. The evangelist once clearly and cleverly, thoughtfully said, entertainment is the devil's substitute for joy. We see depressed and suicidal teens running to entertainment to find what they can only find in Yeshua, joy. A great apostasy is spurred when confession believers look to entertainment to fill their spiritual void instead of Messiah. If you would stop running to the world and start running to Messiah, you would find what you seek. But many of the youth are looking to their dads to show them the way, and where are they? Many walk away from their pregnant wives. They run around instead of hanging around. Many don't know and others don't care about the joy in Messiah enough to share it with their own families. Yeshua said, if you cause one of these little ones who trust in me to fall into sin, it would be better for you to have a large millstone tied around your neck and he drown in the depths of the sea. You find that in Matthew 18:6, Mark 9:42, Luke 17:2. It were better for him that a millstone were hanged around his neck and he cast into the sea than that he should offend one of these little ones. We can cause our children to sin by giving them an evil example to live by. We can lead them into atheism when we mock piety. We can lead them into Laodicean, lukewarm, false assurances when we give soft names to gross sins. We have fathers that are becoming a hindrance to their own children's spiritual lives because they refuse to pray for them. It's been said you cannot live wrong and pray right. Then David prays, may you have success and build the house of Yahweh your Elohim, as he said you would. It's the desire of a father to see his son not only take his place in his work, but that he would be greatly successful and prosper in it. Fathers want the best for their children. But I pray that Yahweh blesses the fathers who want the best for their children's souls. David reminds Solomon that it is Yahweh's will for him to finish what his father started, as Yahweh said he would. In order to take up the task of building this temple, he would need wisdom. That is why a godly father prays for understanding. 1 Chronicles 22, verse 12. Only Yahweh give thee wisdom and understanding, and give thee charge concerning Israel, that thou may keep the law of Yahweh thy Elohim. The law is the Torah. The king had done his part, and his time had passed, and Yahweh was pleased with what he had done. But now it was time for Solomon to do his part. Fathers should teach their children that success in Yahweh is the greatest success there is. Solomon was the wisest man there was, but he did not plan the temple. He had to borrow the plans from his father David, who got them directly from Yahweh. Just like Joshua from Moses, Elisha from Elijah, and Timothy from Paul. Everything Solomon had, he owed to his predecessor. There are many that work the fields and plow the ground and sow the seeds, and they bleed and cry, and they sweat, laboring and suffering the pain of their toil only to have someone to take over their labor, perhaps steal away some of their glory. David didn't care for glory because it wasn't a house for David, it wasn't for Solomon. It was a house for Yahweh and for all his glory. Solomon was going to need wisdom and understanding now more than ever before David was moving on. If our children won't pray for wisdom themselves, then we fathers must pray for it for them. Where does wisdom begin? Solomon's Proverbs and David's Psalm says that the fear of Yahweh is the beginning of wisdom. We don't hear those two words much anymore, the El fearing. We hear Yahweh loving and Yahweh praising, but not Elohim fearing. Does the youth of America fear Yahweh? I know there's Christian youth today, and they love the Master, and I know they praise Yahweh, but if they feared Yahweh, they wouldn't be doing half of the things that they do today. When a person both loves Yahweh and fears Yahweh, they want to obey Yahweh. David says that you may keep the laws of Yahweh your Elohim. It is a godly father's desire to see his kids love Yahweh and praise Yahweh, but also always fear Yahweh. I don't know of a better position a young person can be in his early life than when he fears Yahweh. He is begging for wisdom, and he doesn't even realize it. And Yahweh will not disappoint. It's a good thing, too, because like Solomon, the positions we are called to do in this new era need wisdom to work with people, and we need fear of Yahweh to know that there is a greater king than ourselves that we must answer to someday. A godly father prays for blessing, he prays for understanding, and he also prays for strengthening. 1 Chronicles 22:13. Then shalt thou prosper if thou takest heed to fulfill the statutes and judgments which Yahweh charges Moses with concerning Israel. Be strong and of good courage, dread not, nor be dismayed. A father prays for his child's strength and for them to have courage. David, being king himself, knew the dangers that awaited Solomon and commanded him to be careful to follow Yahweh and his laws. David suffered greatly after the sin of killing Uriah to sleep with his wife. A father's desire is that his kids doesn't make the same mistakes he did in his youth. David understands the temptations of the world, and he prayed that Solomon would have the moral courage to stand against it. Each generation of believers must face their own set of trials, and they will be defined by what they do with them. Some generations repent, others rebel, some are judged, some are blessed. We can be known as the great generation that prayed for the generations coming behind us, the way the old-timers prayed for us, or we can be known as the generation that did nothing and let the world go to hell. Today we have a spirit of relativism that sees and judges everything by feelings. That may be your reality, but this is mine. That may be your truth, but this is mine. Abortion may be wrong for you, but it's not for me. My Elohim wouldn't judge me. Let me say this as lovingly as I can. You don't know Yahweh. He will judge us all. The word says so. But the word of Yahweh means nothing to the relativists of today. It's just an ancient book of tales. My own family told me that. Why do our children need strength today? Because they are surrounded by rebels and atheists, Elohim haters, false believers, and a growing group of people that continuously make Yeshua an idol instead of making him master. By conforming an idea of Yeshua to their preference instead of conforming themselves to his reality. And if we follow David's prayer for Solomon and are careful to observe the laws of Yahweh, we will not lose our bearing. Observe the Torah. If we don't teach our children right from wrong, you better believe that society will teach our children that as long as what you do doesn't hurt anyone, then it's okay to do whatever you want. From porn to drugs, from adultery to stealing, from homosexuality to lying. A man by the name of Rabbi Zacharias said, with no facts as a reference, what is normal is purely a matter of preference. That is why we need godly fathers praying for their children. A minister once concluded his sermon by saying, if there's someone here who wants help in getting to know God, and you would like me to pray for you, please raise your hand. And a young man stood up and he said, please pray for me, sir. The burden of my sin is too heavy to bear. After the service, the minister talked with the man and he led him to Jesus. The young man had been wandering around the country for 8 years. He never contacted his parents during those 8 years. So he decides to write them and tell them about the change in his life. Several days later, a reply came from his mother. My dear son, you must have accepted Jesus Christ at the same hour your father died. He had been sick for a long time, and that day he was very restless. He tossed from side to side in his bed, crying out, Lord, please save my poor wandering boy. I'm sure that this is one of the reasons you became a Christian, was Dad's unceasing intercession. It could be that all of Solomon's success was solely based upon a father's prayer. Father Yahweh, please save the ones I love. May Yahweh answer your prayers with a blessing.